Hey guys, welcome to session number 11 of the Trailer Music Composers Podcast. Welcome! One man with one microphone who is still incredibly proud of his daring feat of doing the ledge bungee in New Zealand. Welcome to the Trailer Music Composers Podcast. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Trailer Music Composers Podcast. Now, I got an interesting question. It was actually a post on one of my previous podcasts in the Trailer Music School from one of my students. It wasn't a direct question, it was part of the comment she'd left. The question was, sometimes I can't tell whether my track is good or not. And I have to say, as soon as I read that, I thought, of course, I've got to cover this on the podcast, because it's again one of those universal things that we all have, because we are all sat there, usually on our own. I'd probably say in the dark, but I don't want to paint a stereotypical picture of trailer music composers. We're all sat there on our own, working hard on our tracks, and sometimes what's the saying? You can't see the wood for the trees. Sometimes you're so deep in the track and deep in the process that you press play on it for the millionth time that day, and you think, you know what? I don't actually know if this is good anymore. In fact, usually, thinking about the previous podcast episodes, the inner critics, they're going, "You're rubbish, just give up. You're not original, just give up." All those things are kind of flying into your head. But I think I've got some advice for you guys who are confronted with that question. How do I know if my track is good or not? A couple of them are shortcuts. I say a couple, like I'm going to say loads and loads, but I'm not going to. I'm going to say a few, and they're probably going to be closely linked together. But first of all, let's sort of paint that scenario again. You sat on your desk, not on your desk, on your chair, at a desk, and you're working hard. Say you've been working the whole day on a trailer queue, which I generally don't recommend spending that much time on one queue anyway, because of the modes of creation. And what I mean by that is that writing a whole trailer queue involves many hats, and actually switching between the hats is not like an instant process. It takes energy, it takes time to switch your processing, and this is my first sort of tip to it. And I've covered this stuff, and I will cover this again, because it's a huge aspect of being a composer, in my point of view, that you must be aware of what hat you're wearing when you're in the process of production. And what I mean by that is, there is the ideation stage where you're just playing around, improvising on the piano, fiddling around with your knobs on your synth. You're just chucking stuff into your session. You're not really necessarily thinking of the finished track. You're not necessarily thinking of the mixing. You're not thinking about the orchestration per se. You're trying to start the fire, or as I like to think of it, you're trying to tap into the flow of inspiration that is always there. It's just whether you've got the tube blocked or not. You're in the ideation stage, so you're basically throwing things on the wall and seeing what sticks. And then there's the next stage, which is the second stage of ideation. It's where you've got a spark has been lit in you, the flow has started, and you then create. You then write. You are composing. You are taking your sounds and you are giving them structure. And that's the key to that next step, is structuring the stuff that you have. Then the next step would be, the orchestration, which is essentially choosing your colours, your textures, your timbres, your dynamics, etc. And then the next step would be the mix, which is balancing everything so it sounds good. And the next step, which would be mastering, which is magical wizardry at the end, probably involving expensive plugins, or, a mastering engineer in my case, because I don't dare say that I know anything about mastering. So let's return. So say you've got that whole day on your trailer queue, right? you're doing the ideation stage 1 and 2, you're doing the orchestration, so that's composing, orchestrating and mixing. Now, you have to approach a track differently for each of those things. Some might argue that there is an element of orchestration in composition and there is an element of mixing within composition, and once you master this, or at least I become aware of it, there is always shades of grey. Not 50 of them, I'd probably say more, but there is always shades between composing, orchestrating and mixing. And the nice thing is when you get into the initial ideation and composition stage, where you naturally orchestrate and naturally mix as part of that process. So we've got your 4 stages, or 3 stages, whatever you want to call it. Going between those hats takes time and energy, and also it's a different thought process. As a composer, as somebody who is creating and finding ideas, you are the optimist. You are endlessly positive. You are thinking, oh, that sounds great. Oh, this is nice. Oh, you're like a child in a sweet shop, like, when you're scrolling through the synth presets, you're like, burp, yes, no, burp, yeah. You're just looking for stuff that is exciting, and that's the great thing. So that's one thing, right? Orchestrating. Ideally, you are still an optimist, but what you're looking there is you're looking at it differently. You're going, well, there's a thought process behind what I'm doing here. So if you're orchestrating for live performance, it's different to orchestrating for a track that's made completely and entirely on a computer. So for instance, I have written piano parts that are next to impossible for pianists to play, but it didn't matter because no one was going to play it. It's just going to be put on a trailer. Whoop! Okay, so you're approaching your orchestration differently. You're thinking about the process more. You're thinking, okay, what are my ranges here? What am I trying to say with these colours? Your thought process is more critical. And that's, again, something that I always advise, is to keep your critical thought out of the compositional process. With the compositional process, just chuck it on there. Everything that you like and gets you excited, throw it in there, and then put it aside. Start another track, throw it in there, and then you go back to those tracks at a later date with your orchestrating in mind, with your fine-tooth comb. You're thinking, okay, well, how can I bring out this sound that I like, that I've chucked in here? This big fat synth. You go, yes, how can I orchestrate this to bring out some more? You go, okay, well, obviously, it's this range, so I'm going to throw in some big, farty trombones, bass trombones as well. And you're thinking like that. So it's a little bit more critical. And then, obviously, with a mix, you're still thinking critically. You're thinking, okay, what's in the wrong place? What's too loud? What's too quiet? You're essentially looking for problems. Where am I peaking? What needs to be compressed? You're going in there, kind of shaping everything up, and to an extent, you also have a producer's hat. And by producer, I don't mean like music producer, pumping out fat beats. I'm talking about a producer, as in somebody who goes to a track and shapes it to be something even more. You're restructuring it essentially. So in the same way that you would have that process, luckily most of us have publishers and other people who will be doing that work for us. You'll send them your track, and then they will come back and say, take this out, remove that, add this, that type of thing. So some of us will have that producer hat on too. We're restructuring it as we're working. So again, we're being critical of the piece. Do you see where I'm going here? And then obviously when it comes to the mix and the master, you're being critical of how the sounds are. You're not looking for stuff that's exciting, and if you are, you're looking for a critical ear that will let you take that sound that you think is freaking awesome and make it be the signature sound of your cue. So you're thinking critically. So we have 2 things here. We have the optimistic, exciting phase of creation, of composition. We have the critical phase of structuring, of further development, of mixing, of orchestrating, where you have to be more critical of what you're doing. And if those 2 hats are on at the same time, you've basically got a little argument going on creatively, right? you're going, oh, this is amazing, but then the orchestrator's going, but it's in the wrong range, or actually it's going to mess with the low mids of my drums. You've got someone who is fighting your every creative step, and what you start to get is fatigued, and that then leads to the direct result. Well, I'm sure I could have said that in a much more eloquent way. That leads directly to the problem of not knowing whether your track is good or not, because you've basically sat there and had an argument with yourself over your track. Okay, so that is my first thing, is to follow my previous advice, which is keep the exciting creation phase separate from thinking and criticising your track. Make sounds, do stuff that's exciting on one day or one part of the day. No mixing, no orchestrating, beyond obviously going, well, I think some strings playing this would be amazing, beyond anything exciting like that. No critical thinking. Save that for editing later on when you edit your track. And that way you will save energy, you will be more prolific, and you will probably find that the tracks you are producing get you more and more excited. Because when you go back to listen to it with a critical ear, you'll go, yes, this has wings, this has promise, this has, mileage, all those words that basically mean this track can and will be amazing. So the next one. This one is a tricky beast. And I suggest this with a warning, because this can be a very, very useful tool, but it can also be the rabbit hole of doom. And this is direct comparison. And the reason I say direct comparison is because what you deem as a good track will depend on what you deem as a good track. So some people might say this track is good because of the mix. Some people might say this track is good because of the orchestration. Some people might say that this track is good because of the structuring. This track is good because of the samples. All these levels of goodness can be compared directly to other tracks that you think are good. Now, this can be a very useful tool, especially with mixing and stuff like that, when you can literally put a track side by side and compare them sonically with all our fancy tools that, to be honest, I don't really understand, although I like to sound like I do. You can sit there and go, oh, look at the EQ there. Oh, they look the same. Great. Okay, so you can compare directly. Comparison is really, really useful. And you can sit there and you can think about how somebody else had structured their Act 3, how somebody else had used their build in the Act 2. Comparisons like that. So you think, okay, does this have the same level of excitement? Is this the same level of drive? Is this mixed as well? Is this whatever it is you're looking for to rate, to qualify? But the reason I give you a warning about this is because comparison can lead to the dark days of the inner critic being far too vocal. And what I mean by that is, if you do the comparison at the wrong stage, i.e. when you're not feeling in that right mood, or you are not as in control of your own thought process as you would like, you'll hear a track and go, oh man, mine is rubbish, and then you'll just basically just sit there slagging yourself off. So go into comparison with real caution. I generally don't compare my tracks to other people, not because I think I'm better than other people, but because I know myself, and I know if I start comparing my tracks to other people, I will do one of two things. I will try and make mine sound too similar to theirs, not because I'm intending to steal it, but just because, I think I'm a bit of a magpie. I will go, oh, I love what they've done there. Let's see if I can do that too. And then I'll end up just kind of essentially copying parts of their track, and I don't want to do that. So yeah, don't do that. And the other one is that I would tend to start being mean to myself, even, I say this with the most modesty I can muster, even with 8 trailer awards and countless syncs, I still will listen to somebody else's track and go, I'm a fraud. And then I go, okay, you shut up. I know when to shut that voice up, but I still don't like hearing it. So yeah, that's generally why I don't do comparison. I mean, sometimes I do for mix purposes, and sometimes I do more for an inspiration. Oh, I love the synths they've got there. Oh, I love the strings. Because it's nice to hear what other people are doing. So when I do the comparison, it will be directly on a trailer. So rather than listening to their tracks in isolation, I will listen to their tracks in situ. Because then you see the real purpose of the cue. And also you'll see that it's being synced, which is always worthwhile. Okay, so we've gone into knowing your creative process and making sure that you're not mixing your editor with your composer, because they don't get along really. I mean, if we're honest with each other. That was me being honest with my editor. And then we've got comparison. Now this last one, and this is the big one really. This is the money. And this holds true, I think, for everything in life. Right? Yes, wise words from Richard today. It is a life lesson of follow what gets you excited. Follow your curiosity, follow your enjoyment. Obviously, Tay, when I say follow what gets you excited, I mean musically, obviously. So this can be brought into your life in all aspects. Follow your curiosity, follow what you enjoy, because otherwise you're going to be, you'll end up doing stuff that you don't enjoy, and what's the point in that really? So this ties in with your music, right? So if you are doing stuff that you enjoy, you will generally find that you produce a nice feeling, right? You will feel good when you're doing stuff you enjoy, and that feeling, that energy will go into your cue, right? And that will then feed to whoever listens to it. Again, I'm going there. I'm going to the energy levels again, because I think it is hugely important, the energy that you put into your music. If you're putting it's not very good, I'm not a great composer, that's going to go into your tracks, guys. Don't do that. Sit there and find stuff that gets you excited. Do stuff that gets you excited, even if the only thing that gets you excited is making risers. Be the master of risers. Just do stuff that gets you excited, because the thing is, if you do that, you're, I would presume, more likely to continue doing it, and perseverance is, I would probably say, the biggest part to most people's success. It's talented people are always guaranteed success, because if they don't persevere, then they won't continue, and if you don't continue, then you reduce the amount of chances you have to succeed, etc., etc., etc. And I go back to the fact it took me 7 years before I could go full time. So the fact that I was always trying to do things that I enjoyed, I think was a huge part of my success. So if you carry on following what you enjoy, following your curiosity, then you will actually find yourself getting better and better at knowing what it is that you enjoy, knowing what it is that gets you excited, and therefore knowing what it is that you think is good. And that will apply to your training music as well. If you carry on practicing following those moments of enjoyment, you will start to notice that actually you're producing cues that you just think rock. You're like, hey, this is awesome, send. Hey, this is awesome, send. Because you have listened to that. It's your intuition, basically. Listen to your higher soul, whatever it is you want to call it. That's the thing that you're training yourself to listen to. And I give that to you in answer to the how do you know if your track is good or not? Listen to it, right? And I don't mean after a 12-hour sesh. I mean of composing. I mean listen to it after you've had a break from it. That break could be a lovely 15-minute cup of tea. It could be a nice half an hour salt bath. It could be a swim in the sea. It could be a night's sleep. It could be a week. It could be 4 months of paternity leave. Whatever it is, take a break from it and listen back to it when you're in a good mood. That's really key. And then you'll be like, oh, Rich, I'm never in a good mood. Oh, okay. Probably should look at that. So listen back to when you're in a good mood, and if when you're listening back to it, even if it's only a slight part of you, listen to it, and if it gets you excited, you're onto a winner. you know. And if you're like, well, I like it, cool. What is it you like about it? Is it a sound that you like? How can you make that sound more of the cue? You know, you think back to the amazing trailer for Alien, you know, that original kind of like screeching sound they had, you know, that one. They used that again in, was it Prometheus? Yeah, I think it was Prometheus. I mean, that trailer was basically just that sound. And that sound was friggin' awesome. So if there's a sound in your cue you like, great. If it's the chord sequence, great. Think about ways, because you've got your editor hat on, that you can bring out the stuff that gets you excited. It might just be this. You might listen back to it after your composing section and go, you know what, this is awesome. I'm going to send this off. Because admittedly, I quite often do that. You know, poor Vic at Elephant Music, the amount of like very, very rough sketches I've sent him, because I've just done something, I've gone, this is awesome, and I've sent it off. And you know, Act 2 is basically like 36 bar loop, but just because we've worked together so long, he kind of knows that I'm obviously going to develop it past the 36 bar loop. I'll at least add some other loops on top, if not anything else. Anyway, so find what gets you excited and find what makes you curious. And by that I mean, you know, ooh, that type of curiosity. Kind of like, you know, like, I still get this, you know, we're getting dinner plates out for dinner at home, and one of my kids bangs a bowl and I go, ooh, that sounds cool. Curiosity. I'm curious as to what that sound was. So then I take that bowl and I ding it in my study, and then hello, I've got a sound that I like. And then you'll find that you're surrounding yourself with stuff that you like, and you're surrounding yourself with ideas that you like, and it just snowballs like that. And if you carry on following your enjoyment and curiosity, you'll find yourself just producing the work you like. You know, I'm not saying you're going to have days when you're not going to have days of like, you know, low levels of energy and, you know, of feeling a bit rubbish about the work you're producing. We all have that. Our life is a bunch of cycles. You know, we're all going to have ups and downs regardless. So we will always have ups and downs in our compositional process, and it's good to know when you're on the up and when you're on the down, so that you know that you're looking through either your lovely pink goggles of love, or your they sound like really dubious lovemaking glasses. I mean, like, as in rose-tinted, that's what I was looking for, rose-tinted glasses, or whether you're looking through, you know, the sad blue lens of, I should just give up. You know, I've been there, totally been there. I should just give up, you know, I'm not very good at this, I'm just a fraud. Yeah, shush you, onwards. So, you know, if you want advice about dealing with the inner critic, listen to that podcast where I talk about advice about that. So yeah, there we have it. We have our 3 tools to help you know whether your track is good or not. And the thing is, I can give you, I will, because I just love talking about this stuff. I'll give you more tips to help you with this as well. But those 3 really rely heavily on you having some self-awareness. You know, and if you don't have that level of self-awareness where you still don't know, you're like, followed your advice, Rich, I still don't know what I like, what this, what the other, and I would suggest, you know what, take some time to do some meditation, clear yourself out, take some time to do some exercise, clear yourself out, have a salt bath, you know, those things, they'll help you get rid of the bad juju, you know, the bad energy that's fogging your mind. Get some sleep. That's a huge one for me at the moment anyway, with a 4-month-old. And then you'll have the tools, and at the absolute last resort, you know, you've gone through your stages of composition, you've kept your editing separate, you've compared and you thought that yours was still rubbish, you have tried to do what you enjoy but you're still feeling a little lost, you've meditated, you've had a bath, you've done some exercise, you've had some sleep, you still don't know if your track is good enough. Then you send it to somebody else for a point of view. I mean, obviously my students send me their tracks on a regular basis for me to feedback, and usually my feedback is pretty like straightforward. This is awesome! just because I'm get very excited about new work. And if it's not, this is awesome. It's hopefully helpful feedback. And I rely heavily on the wonderful Vic at Elephant Music for giving me his feedback. And this is again why it's good to have other composers. All the composers in the Trailer Music School have each other to give each other help and guidance. And it's good to have community. I went into composing feeling insanely egotistical, insanely competitive, because that's what the music industry was painted out to me, which was entirely wrong. The music industry is filled with lovely people who will help you and will want to help you succeed, because there's plenty of success for everybody, and that's what I would like you to do. Follow my advice, because that will help you in your process. And also get yourself surrounded by other composers, other like-minded composers. Obviously I can surround myself with some dubstep producers, but I'm not sure that's something I enjoy. So I wouldn't do that. Whereas people who are fascinated by crazy weird sounds and want to make music out of those weird sounds, now that's stuff that I enjoy, Or people who are interested in, not traditional orchestration for live performance, although that does interest me hugely. Trailer composers who I listen to that and I go, wow, how did you do that? That was awesome. I want to see and listen to people who are interested in shaping the same chord sequences but in a new and interesting way, because that's what I enjoy and that's what I'm curious about, among millions of other things. So I really want to say thank you so much for taking the time again to listen to this, and I really would love to hear about how you're getting on with this advice, if it's helping you, because otherwise I'm just talking into my phone in the woods, which actually I really enjoy, so bonus for me. And obviously if you want to learn more about trailer music, head on over to the Trailer Music School. We've got tons of courses, we've got sample libraries, and we've got obviously loads of awesome like-minded composers who just love trailer music, love making noise, and are keen to help each other. Yes, I wish you all the best in your trailer music endeavours, and I want to say thanks again for listening, and see you around.